Yeah.
So this is the ins and outs of opening a guest house, an Airbnb, a VRBO, a traditional bed and breakfast, and all the above, any kind of a short-term rental. So anybody that's interested in opening a short-term rental, this is the event for you. And tonight we have Lauren Coates, and Lauren is, and I love this, Lauren is a global travel specialist and also a vacation rental consultant and freedom facilitator. I love that. And then she says, how far can we go? So Lauren, how far can we go? Give us your background. What were you doing before you got into, say, the short-term rental business and, of course, the whole travel? I've scrolled a little bit. Check out her Facebook. She's got these great pictures where she's traveling and doing all this fun stuff. So what is your background, Lauren? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so I actually made my first international travel when I was 14. And from that moment, I decided I will be a world traveler. That is my main priority. So
Okay.
I studied graphic design in college so I could be a digital nomad. And so after college, I moved to Germany. And then after there, I moved to Brazil. And I was a freelance graphic designer for all these years. I went to 32 countries and I traveled pretty much solo the entire time in my 20s, which was an awesome experience. And one day I was walking down the street in India and I kind of got this intuition, you need to go back to California and do a passive income business. And so I booked a plane and I went because I follow my intuition. And not 3 weeks later, I was connected with some property developers who were looking for a manager who wanted someone to run their properties before they demolish them. So they gave me all their properties. I had no experience. I had a mutual friend who kind of helped with the deal. And I started running these 7 Airbnbs by myself. This was back in 2016. So I learned through trial and error. It was great.
You just jumped into the fire, didn't you?
Well, that's the big story. I'm a travel enthusiast, and all of those years of travel, I lived out of guest houses. I lived out of Airbnbs. I lived in foreign countries. I lived a year in India, many long time in Indonesia, Australia, Brazil. I've lived 5 years, so I know exactly what a traveler needs because I'm the market.
Yeah.
So I was able to come to hosting from the perspective of I know exactly what these people need. I know exactly how to go above and beyond. And so it's kind of like second nature for me to help other people and also, set up guest houses that travelers are going to be excited about.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Because you have to know your audience, and it sounds like because you are that world traveler, you know your audience very well. So, what was your biggest hurdle when you first started with 7 properties all at once? Because most of our listeners are brand new. Some of them have not even started with their first one. And we want to talk about tonight not only getting into the Airbnb business, and I'll call it the Airbnb business, short-term rental business. Doesn't matter what platform you're going to advertise on, but the short-term rental business. And of course, then there's all these different styles of short-term rental. You can have the traditional bed and breakfast where you are there and provide this full sit-down breakfast experience for your guest. And those types of bed and breakfast are generally a destination in themselves. And it's places like, you're going to go to Nashville and you're going to have this bed and breakfast experience, and it's all about the location. Then there are some where folks are just traveling through and they're just looking for a place to stay, and they just need a nice, comfortable, clean place that, again, that speaks to them as a traveler. It could be somebody that's just working in the area for a while. It could even be a midterm. We've kind of adopted the midterm into our conversation here as well, for some of those folks that like the traveling nurses. I have a short term and a midterm, and I go back and forth. I can put my nurses in my short term if my midterm is already booked, and I can also in between my midterm bookings, I can also book that as a short term. So there, I can kind of go back and forth. And so all of our listeners on this particular podcast, they're trying to discover and find maybe where they fit in and how they can get started. But also, once you get started, wonder if something happens, like God forbid, when COVID happened, my reservations were canceling faster than they were coming. They were canceling because all the events they were coming to got canceled. And so I also want to speak to, what was your safety net in case you didn't get the bookings, like during COVID? Because if you were there in 2016, you went through COVID with these. So talk a little bit about that. What is your biggest hurdles, and how did you get through when maybe the bookings weren't coming in?
Sure. So I would say the biggest hurdle usually for most Airbnb hosts, and me particularly as well, is finding the perfect cleaning team. And when I say the perfect cleaning team, I do mean the perfect cleaning team. They are property managers as well. And so they need to be checking for damages, reporting things, checking for stains. The amount of things that an Airbnb cleaner has to do is way above and beyond a maid that would come and clean your house. So finding cleaners that would make themselves available, be very reliable, had a backup team that they could train. So if, a last minute cancellation or an extension, someone could go in. So I would say the foundation of the rental business is really the cleaning team. And until you find those perfect cleaners that really, really you build a solid relationship with, your business is a little bit shaky. If you don't mind cleaning and you live nearby, it's no issue. But otherwise, we definitely want to have a reliable cleaning team. So as far as when the pandemic hit, I actually transitioned to long-term furnished rentals with Furnish Finder, which it sounds like you're also a member of. And it wasn't that much longer until the developer was ready to demolish my properties. So I had been running them for about 3.5 years, around the clock, really not taking a day offline because I have 7 rentals. I can't really rely on anyone else to take care of that many guests and know exactly what to do. So I was kind of excited to close down my business and transition into consulting, which happened exactly at the moment of the pandemic because Airbnb came out with a program called the Airbnb Ambassador. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Yeah, so they reached out to me literally a week or two before the pandemic and were like, hey, we'd love for you to be an ambassador. We'll pay you a lot of money to train new hosts. Do you want to do that? So I signed up, and not a few days after, I had my first consulting client. And she was like, I really want to set this up. I want to attract nurses. So we took a marketing strategy in that way. I did have the privilege of all these rentals were in Hollywood, California. So it really wasn't challenging for me to fill the calendar as long as I was checking the main boxes of a successful rental, which is clean, comfortable, and really beautiful, and a place where people can really relax. So yeah, I would say those were the main parts. If someone needs to fill up their calendar and they're worried about not getting bookings, there are a few different things I would say. Number one, and Kathy, I'm sure you've probably spoke to this before, but staging and professional photography. Like I really encourage, when you're going to start your short-term rental business, to do it right. That was one of my main hurdles when I started, is that I didn't have experience. And I was looking at stuff online, but I didn't really know who to believe. And once I got that good advice, like get a professional photographer in, make sure it looks like an interior design magazine, then my bookings started to skyrocket. Then I got my reliable cleaning team. I was always getting 5-star cleanings. I was up to Superhost. Then I was able to invest some of that cash flow into nicer art, nicer things, raise my price. It's, as you know, it's kind of a snowball effect with short-term rentals, that you can earn a lot of money over time once the platform has trust with you. But I would say getting on Furnish Finder is ideal, no matter what long-term, short-term, what you want to do. That's such a valuable market to have traveling professionals be able to find your place. Their assistants, executives, not only nurses and doctors, but many people are relocating, home shopping, and they're not looking for an Airbnb. They want something midterm, as you said. So yeah, I would say getting those boxes in order, and then not being afraid to upgrade your place and make it beautiful. And then to do a little bit of research on the pricing, right? You want to use AirDNA, and you want to check and make sure that your rates are competitive. You may have noticed that new comparable pricing feature. Do you have that going on, Air? Yeah, this saves so much time.
It
Yeah.
does, because they're doing all of the homework for you.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. So that feature basically means you get to see what the properties in your neighborhood that are comparable to yours, what actual rates they're getting. So you don't have to do so much research and go into going into every listing.
I love that. Let's go back to when you got handed these 7 properties. What condition were they in when you walked through the door that first time?
They were empty. They were a little bit old. They needed some maintenance. Technically, that mutual friend, he said he would do the maintenance and more of the guy stuff, but he disappeared after about 10 days. He wasn't interested in the deep cleaning process that we were going through. Luckily, he did some handyman work for me, but in general, it was a little bit of a fix up. These were old houses ready to be demolished from the 1920s and 1930s.
Well, when you say to be demolished, and again, we've got a lot of investors in our group here, and some of us have started in long term, and then the segue is over to midterm and short term. Was there zoning code violations? Was there things like that that you had to get lifted, or when you say ready to be demolished, what degree of ready to be demolished was that?
So the owner of the properties was planning to demolish them and build luxury condominiums. So he was going through the process of getting all of that paperwork. And as you're in Hollywood, California, there's a lot of red tape. So I'm not familiar exactly what protocols he had to go through to get them demolished. But essentially, we only opened the calendar 6 months in advance because he was hoping at any minute that he would get his things in order and the correct offices would give him approval to demolish and start building these condos.
Okay, so it wasn't like zoning had put any red tags on them that they couldn't be inhabitable. This was just a strategy that he was pursuing to build something bigger and better that maybe would cash flow better than these single families. So you, from what I understand, you were able then to just go in and do some whatever the maintenance was and put them out there on the market. Am I on the right track there? Does that sound right?
Yeah, they were totally livable.
Okay.
He had waited for the long-term tenants to leave. He was very busy and he didn't have time to deal with kind of the day-to-day of long-term tenants. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go ahead.
Sure. So he just said that he preferred to have Airbnb going, but this was back in 2016 when Airbnb was pretty new. And so there weren't any laws or legislation or permit systems like there are in Los Angeles now when we started.
Now, are you grandfathered in on those properties, or did you have to then get all the right certifications as you went along?
They're demolished. So
they
by
are.
the time,
okay.
Yeah, by the time any permit systems have come out in Los Angeles, these were already demolished.
Okay. So you have done the segue now over to doing consulting. So when you first went in, you had to do some rehab. You got some maintenance stuff done. You did your deep cleaning. How did you decide how you were going to furnish these? How did you make that decision? And I know probably from your background from traveling, but what was your go-to to actually get these furnished?
Well, the owner didn't want to invest a lot because he wasn't sure if it was going to be 6 months only or if it was going to be long. So I ended up buying a pickup truck. I had just come back from living in India for a year. So I bought a pickup truck. I went on free Craigslist, and in Los Angeles, free Craigslist is pretty amazing. So I was just driving around picking up free things for about a month.
Okay, so you just kind of furnished them with what you had, got everything furnished. And how about the linens?
Yeah, so the linens was quite a discovery process, as you know. At first, I bought linens and they required ironing. Not everybody knows that most linens you need to iron. They come out of the dryer wrinkly, right? So I tried a few different kinds. I ended up finding a brand on Amazon that I really loved, and those became my go-to. But in general, I wasn't doing like white linens. I think if I was doing white, it would be a different. But I do recommend everyone to do white nowadays, even if it's a spare bedroom. I just think it's a quality luxury move. And even if, you're not charging so much, it's going to be that extra kind of bonus amenity, that clean feeling that travelers kind of pushes them over to the edge of being happy with your product.
Do you recall the brand that you went with? What was your go-to brand on Amazon? Do you remember offhand?
I don't.
Okay, so shop Amazon. Now, the good news about Amazon, and the reason I like Amazon is because if you do get into a pinch and you have to do a quick flip, Amazon can usually deliver like within 24 hours, depending on what you pick. And sometimes you have to pick a different brand to get that immediate delivery, but Amazon is definitely the way to go there. And so in your situation, you basically were managing for someone else. Let me ask you this, because here we're in our local area, we have to be either a licensed realtor under a broker to do any kind of property management, but we can be what's called a co-host. So did you label yourself as a property manager or as a co-host for the owner?
Label myself like to myself, or where do you mean? Sorry.
Just as if you introduced yourself in say a networking event or in your travels and somebody said, hey, what is it that you do? What was your actual position since you didn't physically own the properties?
Oh, I see what you mean. Well, actually, I ended up moving into one of his other properties where I was kind of the landlord. I had roommates. I kind of rented out and subletted rooms. It was quite a big property. So for that home, I was technically a property manager, and that was another income of mine. But I was doing all the property management of all the properties, and
Okay.
I was the host. So I would say I was an Airbnb super host and a property manager.
Okay. Now, for those of you that are listening, depending on where you're located, you may not be able to call yourself a property manager, because in some areas it requires that you be a licensed realtor and or be under a broker in order to do property management. And it has to be a property management program set up by that brokerage. And then they hire you to be the property manager for you to do that for other folks. Now you can always be the host and property manager for your own property if you own the properties outright, or if they're yours, you're on the deed. Even if you have a mortgage, you're the owner, so you can be the property manager of your own property where we're located. So just kind of do your homework there, and if you have any questions about that, let us know. And Dora, I just saw where she says, or if you have a master lease. So anyway, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But as you got started, you got everything furnished, you got all of the linens in there. You already knew what you liked as a traveler. So did you right up front put some sort of an entry system on these properties where you did not have to be there to meet every single person checking in?
Oh, 100%. I had lock boxes. Yes.
Okay, so you used a traditional lockbox like a realtor would.
Yes, I used a traditional lockbox and I loved it. I find that guests really like the privacy. I also kind of speak a lot about on my YouTube channel and my TikTok show that guests need that freedom to be in the flow. Actually, the gift of traveling is the synchronicity, the magic of the journey. You see something, you stop. You don't have any real time constraints. So when you take that away from the traveler, it's quite a big negative. I would not recommend it. If you need to check guests in on, in person because there's some sensitive things that are hard to use, or perhaps it's a spare room in your own home, something like that, or on the property, I totally get it. But I find that travelers really want and need that flexibility and freedom.
And Dora says, what digital lock do you recommend? I actually have a keyless entry on mine. And then because sometimes those keyless entries can fail, I also have a traditional lockbox with the key in it on a different door, but we don't advertise that. But if for any reason the keyless entry would fail and they would say, oh, I can't get through the door, the keyless entry isn't working, we can direct them to the lockbox so that they're not standing out there waiting for us to show up and let them in at midnight or whatever. You get it. And again, I agree with you. I think it's important to let them have the freedom to arrive whenever they want. And we have folks all the time because of the platform where they found us. They do call and ask. They go, our flight's going to be really late, and can we check in like after midnight? And we're like, sure. arrive at your convenience, whatever works for you. And they're like, wow, this is a first. So my guess is there's a lot of short-term rentals that don't have that freedom. From what I'm hearing from some of my travelers is that they run into that where they have to be there within a certain time. And then if you're on any of these Facebook groups, you see those complaints all over the place. You know, they're like, nope, nope. If they can't check in by 9 o'clock, they'll have to find some other place to stay. And I'm like, what? So that just shocks me. You know, I'm like, we are in the hospitality business. So I, like you, I go out of my way to try to make it easy for the traveler. Mark and I travel quite a bit. We get it. There's times that we haven't rolled in until after midnight, and you know, and we'd hate to have to be locked out somewhere because of that. So we get it. So
yeah, Kathy. Oh, sure. I just to add in, actually, I had a hidden lockbox as well. Like you did a second lockbox just in case, and that was just in case. Let's say the previous guest forgot to leave the keys and the cleaner's there, the cleaner needs to get in, or if the guest loses the keys, I don't have to go over there. I can say, walk around to the bushes.
okay, yeah,
here it is. So I had hidden lockboxes as well, which I think is a great idea, like you had.
Yep, I get it. Yep. Any questions in the audience yet, Adam? Any comments? I know Andorra had a couple of comments. Any recommendation on, well, I'm just using a over-the-counter keyless entry. Yeah, I don't have any particular brand. Andorra had asked that question. Anything else over there?
On the digital, so a particular brand on the digital locks. Yeah. So Mash Lease, she talked about Mash Lease and then digital lock. I am using a Schlage. How do you say that? How Schlage maybe? And one thing that you mentioned, putting out a key just in case the lock fails. One feature of this keyless entry is it has a emergency jump for a 9-volt battery. So you could leave out a battery, right? And like and use that. They'd still have to put it in the code, but that way you don't have a key floating around. That's kind of a cool thing.
That is a cool thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say nowadays I do recommend people to use the keyless entry. Back in the day, which is I guess only 7 years ago, those weren't so popular or readily available. And one last comment, actually, you mentioned that some hosts say that there's a cutoff time for check-in. I also did have this, but it was only because I wanted to make sure that the guest checked in at a certain, you know, that they had gotten in before I went to sleep. I wanted to make sure that they had found the key, found the property, that they weren't locked out, and that they weren't in a bad way. I didn't put it as a limitation, but before I approved a reservation, I would ask, you know, do you know around what time you're going to be checking in? And they said 1 a.m. And I said, okay, well, you know, if you get lost or have any issues, you know, I won't be able to help you because I'll be asleep, you know, so it's up to you if you still want to, you know, book. And then just to make sure that everything was clear with them.
Andorra asked, where do you keep the battery? And that's a great question. You can put that in a lockbox, right? You can put that in an old school, because I mean, a 9-volt battery would fit in an old school realtor lockbox.
Yeah. And you can buy the lockboxes at any like Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever. Yeah. I think Andorra might have made a comment about checking in. She had a condo in St. Petersburg for a long time, Florida. So, and again, she was not on site. She was back in Ohio, and they were checking in Florida. So, Mark and I, we do have a way that they can contact us if they happen to have a problem, you know, late in the middle of the night. We don't like to be, we don't like to have to get up at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. to help, but we have a time or two because somebody, you know, they arrive with this big trailer and then they're like, where do you want us to park the trailer? And we're like, oh my gosh, okay, let me get dressed. So we have had some of that. So how did you handle, let's say, a problem guest? How did you handle that? And did you live close by these 7 properties?
I did. I lived about 10 minutes away from all of them. Yeah. So, I mean, I will say there are many different shades of problematic guests. there's the small issues, there's the, maybe not my fault, maybe their fault, maybe personal preference that seems a little bit strange to me, but in general, I find that it's really important to let the guests know that you really care about their problem. I like to take the approach that you don't know how tired they are, what they've been through, if they're hungry, what's going on, if they're venting on you. So I would say first step is like never take it personal. It's really not about you, even if there's something wrong in the property. Next, depending on the level of problem, especially if it's my fault, I will immediately offer some kind of partial refund. I do think that that's a little risky business because sometimes then they will kind of debate for more of a refund or want a whole, like you give them an arm and they want the whole, you give them, I don't know what that saying is, right? But I have had that, like I'll offer them a little bit back and then they'll be like, no, I want 4 times what you offered. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work for me. So I would say partial refunds are a great way to get a problematic guest off your back. Offering them some extra things, being kind. I feel like letting them know there's a sense of urgency, no matter how bizarre the complaint is, that yes, I'm on it. I'm going to find a solution for you right now. I think that that's the best way to kind of lower the flames of their anger and really get them to kind of settle down. And then I just do my best to find a solution, no matter how bizarre it is. For example, one Los Angeles, Hollywood, were all the properties, and we had an elderly couple, and they were very angry at me that the bathroom didn't have floor warmers and heated towel racks. And they were very mad. They were like so pissed off. And I was like, oh, well, it's like a tropical climate over here. We don't, and they're like, we've had a floor warmer and a towel rack heater our 50 years of being married together. We need that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to Home Depot right now. I'm going to go see how much they cost. And I did. I went and I found out and I was like, look, I got a quote. I'm going to talk to the property owner. And I had to do something. And even though I know the property owner was going to be like, you're crazy, lady, I had to at least show this couple that I cared about their comfort and that I was interested in, moving towards their direction.
And so
how did you end up resolving that?
How much is a towel warmer? I want one now.
Oh, that's hilarious. Their reservation, I believe, was only like 3 or 4 nights. So I told them I was gathering estimates, looking at it. So, I'm talking to the property owner. And then after they checked out, I just sent them a really, apology. I'm so sorry that, we didn't have those amenities that you really needed on your trip to feel comfortable. I hope you had an okay trip anyway, etc.
And you gave them a partial refund?
No.
I thought that's where you were going with this.
No.
Okay.
Partial refunds, to rephrase, I guess, to clarify a little bit better. For me, partial refunds are for dire scenarios. That's why I was kind of going with, give them a hand and they'll take the whole arm.
But Lauren, they didn't have a towel warmer for the first time in 50 years.
Now, I just have to ask, where Mark and I have traveled a lot. Where do you travel that you get heated floors and a towel warmer automatically? Where do you go to get
horrible places, Kathy? Horrible places. They have to make up for it with the heated towel seat and whatever. So here's a question. What is an example of this is I gotta give Andorra her credit. This is from Andorra. She said, what is an example of when you would offer a partial refund? Like, what are some of those dire things?
Yeah, I would say if there's a cleanliness issue, that's number one. That automatically gets a partial refund. If your cleaner overlooked something that's, really not good, that's amazing. If something's like really broken, if something's really broken, or if they have a terrible attitude, a hair anywhere. A hair anywhere is like you're 1 inch away from having no bookings for a month because this guest is going to leave a terrible review. So yeah, hairs are our nightmare. They're our enemies.
Yeah.
And I would say if there's something to give some more specific examples, I go more for like the empathy. I'm so sorry. I'm going to find a solution right away. Let me do something extra, maybe offer them an extra night if there's not a reservation, right,
Yeah.
same day turnover. I try to go with like more free things and more empathy and feeling and how can I please you? And if that's not the right category due to their attitude, their level of anger, or the particular issue, that's wrong, like maybe something disgusting that they find somewhere, particularly in the kitchen. I found that sometimes guests wouldn't really clean the dishes and they would like hide them in the clean dishes. And sometimes little strange things. One time I had a guest leave some weird stuff in a drawer and underneath the extra bedding, and another guest found that and we're like really, frightened, and I had to offer them, a few partial refund. But
Yeah.
I would say, what about you guys? How do you find partial refunds?
I have never done a partial refund. My main income is my long-term rentals. And so when I have a guest that is incredibly unhappy for any, and sometimes they, they're very balanced. Sometimes they have a chip on both shoulders. So, and if they arrive with a chip on both shoulders, I sometimes just offer to cancel the reservation and let them go find another place. And if I can cancel the same day as check-in and get that reservation entirely canceled, they can't leave a review because the entire cancellation or the entire reservation goes away, and then they can't leave a review at all because it's as if it never happened. It's as if the reservation never happened. And I've done that a couple of times when they show up and they're like, oh, we didn't know this was going to be a house. We thought we were booking a hotel, and and we were going to have a party, and now we find out we can't have all of our 14 friends over, and so this isn't going to work for us. And I'm like, you know what? Perfect. It's not going to work for me either. Let me just take care of that for you.
Yeah.
And so right away, I just cancel the whole thing and be done with it. So I've never really done any partial refunds. The latest one that I had is the guy actually booked the wrong night. And so I gave him all of the electronic check-in, and he even responded and he said, yes, thanks so much. I'll be getting there, kind of late. So I'm like, okay. I said, just want to make sure you get in okay. And finally it got later and later and later. And I said, hey, I said, I see that you're not checked in yet. I said, just letting you know that we are available by phone if you run into any problems, getting in. And he answered, okay. And the next morning, I realized he never came. They were never there. And so I thought, that's odd. And so I thought, well, maybe something happened. Or maybe they're driving and didn't get that far as they thought. Maybe they had car issues. Who knows? And so then the next night, and Adam, you'll appreciate this. The next night, as a matter of fact, Adam was talking and at one of our long-term rentals, or long-term rental meetups, and all of a sudden the gal that was checking in said, somebody's already in my room. What should I do? I'm like, what? And discovered that the guy the night before actually showed up the next day instead, after we'd already left the house to go to this meetup. And so Mark had to go back and sort that all out.
But wait a minute, Kathy. Why did Mark have to go back and sort it all out? Because the dude said, oh, I don't want to leave. I'm out to dinner. Oh, I'm not going to leave.
Yeah, he's out at dinner. He's having dinner.
So Kathy, so we're getting pizza and talking. I'm like going to talk about financing Airbnbs, which, by the way, Kathleen Smith, I saw your message and we'll get to that in a second. And she sends like Kathy and Mark disappear for like 10 minutes. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then Kathy comes back. Mark is dead. He's gone. I don't know where he is. And so I thought they just totally called it quits at that moment or something. And no, she just sent him to go like beat some guy up. And luckily he didn't have to. He just showed up and ripped off his shirt and, but no, that's a crazy story, Kathy. Real quick.
So Mark went back to the house, and the guy he'd left where he was having dinner and went back to the house. The guest who was supposed to be there was at the house, and Mark said that they had already kind of sorted it out before he arrived, because he was a good 20-25 minutes away when he headed that direction. Where we were all with Adam. So anyway, Mark goes in, and the guest that wasn't supposed to be there, he took his things and left. But the booking site had already charged and everything for the night before, because that was the night he made the reservation. So I felt bad because I realized that he probably was a nice guy and just hit the wrong date and had it in his head, you know. And so right through the thread on the booking site, I responded because I wanted there to be a record right in the actual thread of the booking site. And I told him that I felt bad, but it had already been charged through the booking site. I'd already been charged the commission. You know how that works. And so I offered him, if he would contact me directly, that I offered him a free night. Anytime he was in the area again, that I would give him a free night. So basically, I was giving him his money back, and he never responded at all.
Good.
He never said thanks, or I'll let you know, or I appreciate this. Nothing. He just never. I never heard from him. And of course, at that point, he had an actual booking the night before, and so he could have still given me a score. You know, he still could have given me a review, and he never gave me a review either, because I was kind of, you know, getting ready for that, thinking, you know, if he gives me a review, I have to make sure that I kind of rise above and handle it very professionally. And I didn't want to get in, well, you didn't show up, so it's, you know, so I didn't want to get into any of that. And so I just kind of kept my eye out for that review, and it never did come, and I never did hear from him since then. So
real quick, I want to get to Kathleen's question. She said, I have questions about how to finance an Airbnb.
Yes, I want to turn it over because I'm a passive income coach. Adam is in mortgage lending, and I am going to let Adam introduce himself and respond to that question. So go ahead, Adam.
Thank you, Kathy. So, I am a mortgage broker. I broker loans specifically for investors. Lots of long-term rentals, also short-term rentals. Anything from 1 to 4 family into large multifamily and commercial, anything you want. So as long as you're not personally living in it, then I can finance it, or I can find a solution for you. But to answer your question, it's a great question. How do you finance short-term rentals? And the answer is you use something called, there's 2 ways to do it. One, you could go through the traditional route, and you could go to your bank and you could submit all your tax returns and your whole life story and get a conventional loan or an FHA loan or whatever. Really a conventional loan if you're not going to live in it. And then you could go through that process. Alternatively, if you want to close in an LLC, if you want it to not report to your personal credit, if you don't want a ton of paperwork, if you only want to have to submit, let's say, your entity docs, so like how your LLC is organized, and maybe bank statements and a driver's license, then you use something called a non-QM loan, which specifically you'll hear lots of letters here, DSCR. A DSCR loan is a debt service coverage ratio loan. That's where we use the income and the expenses of the property to qualify the loan rather than your personal income. And the beauty of this is that the underwriting's super quick. I mean, you're still going to be 30 days because at the end of the day, we still need an appraisal, and we're at the mercy of the appraiser to get us the report whenever he damn well feels like it. But as long as we've got that, then, I mean, the rest of the underwriting is relatively simple. So even if you don't personally have W-2 income, or if you have weird income because you've been flipping or wholesaling houses, or if you're professionally running Airbnbs all the time and maybe you're paid under the table or paid in, I don't know, Amazon gift cards or something weird, then we can still get you a loan. And what we'll do is we'll use the income projected through airdna.co. We can use that to qualify the loan. Or if if it's in an area where you're lucky enough to be able to support the loan amount just by long-term rents, then we can use an appraiser's valuation, an appraiser's opinion on market rent. So it's an addendum to the appraisal that happens. So when the appraisal happens, they tell you what the value is, and then they'll tell you how much the market rent would be for long-term rent. Some places will actually use an appraiser opinion for short-term rent, but that's not super popular. But I'm a broker, so I mean, I've got like a million lenders, and we can go through all the different options when you call me. I'll put all my contact information in the chat so that we can have a one-on-one conversation. And let's see, and own a cleaning business. Yeah, okay, so Kathleen said she's self-employed as an independent insurance broker and owns a cleaning business. So yeah, if you don't want to have to produce millions of pounds of paper of tax returns, then this would be a perfect product for you.
Yeah, because if you're self-employed, your traditional lenders, they're gonna ask you for 2 years tax returns and all your current documentation, and I mean it's piles and piles. And if you're self-employed and you've got some Schedule C's and some Schedule E's, next thing you know, you're copying all of that to take to your lender to get a conventional note. So anyway, yes, I just did a loan with Adam. It was super, super easy. Love it. So mark it down, get a hold of Adam. The next thing I want to talk about, Lauren, I know that, and one of the questions I think Andorra had was, what did you do about cancellations through the pandemic? But you'd already expressed that you had gotten out of those 7 short-term rentals because the owner finally got his approval to demolish and build whatever he was going to build. So my question is, how did you wind down the rentals? And here's where I want to go with this, with our audience today. Sometimes things happen for whatever reason, and you need an exit plan. And either like the pandemic, when all of your reservations canceled because all the events that all your folks were going to got canceled. And then the different rules and different things went into place during that time that you couldn't charge if they canceled, no matter how late they canceled. And I still don't charge. If somebody calls me up and says, hey, I just tested positive, I need to cancel my reservation, I'm like, oh, please cancel your reservation, because I don't need to add that, because I do rooms out of my house. So I really don't need folks there that have COVID. And so if they need to cancel, I'm like, absolutely not a problem. But for whatever reason, if you need to wind down, and for some reason you say, I need to segue this over to a midterm or over to a long term, or I need to put it on the market to sell it, and you've got all of these bookings, how did you wind down at the other end when it was finally time?
Kathy, can you clarify? I don't quite understand what you mean. I understand winding down, but with many bookings, can you?
Did you have bookings on? I mean, how did you decide to stop? Did you have to make a deadline when you were going to stop bookings? I've got bookings 2 years out. I've got bookings a year out. What did you do with those bookings?
Yeah, we only had the calendar open for 6 months.
Okay.
So in advance, yes. And in fact, we did transition. I had many friends. At that point, I had hosted over 4,000 guests. I had, creatives. I kind of tailored my personal home to filmmakers and photographers coming into LA for a short period of time. And I advertised in different places. So I had already built a kind of network of people that were coming into LA for projects, and they needed something from 2 weeks to 3 months. So I had a kind of roster and an influx of people asking me, do you have anything available? Do you have anything available? And so I was able to fill those Airbnbs with my personal contacts that I had made through landlording,
Okay. Okay.
my personal home. Yeah. And that's basically how it closed down. But as the pandemic, kind of started, like you said, people were canceling. So I did reach out to many of the bookings and say, hey, how likely does it seem that you're going to end up coming? We may need to cancel, so it wasn't quite an issue for me.
Okay. Okay. And it wasn't for me because it wasn't my main income. So as folks had to cancel, because their events they were coming to were canceled, I just sat empty, and it was okay because I had income from my long-term rentals, and those were fine. And so it was okay for me because, again, it wasn't my primary. But if it's your primary income, it gets a little scary when something like that happens. And so you have to make sure, and Adam can speak to this for a little bit as well. You have to make sure, in my opinion, that your numbers work as a long-term rental when you start to purchase a property. So for those of you that haven't purchased yet, you have to make sure that long-term numbers work. So ask yourself, if I purchase this house for this price, and the only thing I can do with it is put a long-term renter in there, and this is the going rate for long-term rents for this 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom or whatever the house is, do your numbers work at that level? Does the rent coming in still cover your mortgage payment, your taxes, your insurance, your capital improvements, if you have to make any, your maintenance issues. Does that long-term rent cover all of that? Now, you don't have to maybe cash flow a ton with a long-term renter if your plan is to short-term rent, but you at least have to cover all of your expenses, in my opinion. And then once you feel comfortable with your numbers there, then you can start looking at a midterm or a short term. And here's the formula in our area, and it could be different where you are, Lauren, but where we are here, whatever your long-term rent is, you can collect about twice that for a midterm and about 4 times that for a short term. And that's a ballpark formula. Different neighborhoods are different, different towns are different. Everything has a little bit of a different twist, but that is a general rule of thumb formula for those of you that haven't purchased your first one. Do your math with long-term numbers. Then know that if you go midterm, you're gonna charge maybe twice that amount, and short term 4 times that amount, which means you're gonna get more cash flow. Now, it's also more work because you're having to flip those units, a midterm maybe every 4 to 6 weeks, and a short term could, if you decide to rent by the day, it could be that you're flipping every day or every 2 days or every 3, depending on what your minimums are. So anyway, so keep that in mind. Adam, did you have a minimum when you had your short term? Was there a minimum stay, or did you do one nights?
Unfortunately, we did do one nights, and yeah, and we had all kinds of issues with parties. That was a real challenge, because especially mine was adjacent to the Ohio State University. So, football.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I get it. Now I do one nights, but I mostly do 2 and 3 night stays in my short term. And then in my midterms, I'm doing a lot of traveling nurses, and most of them will have a 13-week assignment, and oftentimes they'll renew their assignment maybe 1 or 2 times before they move on. So, but my short version of a midterm is usually about 13 weeks before I have to go in and flip it again. So,
are you listed on Furnish Finder, Kathy?
I am. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So during the pandemic, I did have a few consulting clients that were in the crisis kind of that you just asked me about. I didn't particularly have this issue, but I did help them make Furnish Finder listings. I helped them build a marketing strategy to contact realtors. So we kind of focused on people that were moving, looking for their dream home, needed a place, and we kind of targeted that. So for anyone that's thinking about, okay, you can always be on more than one platform like VRBO, Airbnb, Furnish Finder. You do need to update all of those and fill all those out, but you do get wider exposure that way. But I would say once you get a little bit of clout on your listing, like you have some great reviews, getting a website, even if it's just a single landing page, and contacting realtors and just letting them know that you have a high quality product, that is amazing. My client that suffered during the pandemic, she's now bought 3 more investment homes with her cash flow from the first one that we set up. And she's got so much going on with realtors. Her places are booked up. She's making $4 to $6 grand a month for long-term, midterm stays. It's amazing.
Yeah, I did the same thing with mine. I do have a website, and Dora is one of my co-hosts on one of our other groups, and she also has a website. And so we do recommend the same thing. I'm a passive income coach, and one of the things I teach is if you're going to get into any type of real estate, long-term, midterm, short-term rentals, because I'm a buy and hold investor. That's how I identify myself. And I have all 3 of those levels, the long term, midterm, and short term. And I do have all of that on a website so that folks can tap in and they know that you're legitimate. There are so many scams out there these days that folks need to know that they're talking to a real company. And so you kind of have to have a footprint where folks can kind of check you out and see that you do have a brick and mortar somewhere, and that you are an actual person, and they can look at your social media and see that you've got all these friends, and that you're interacting, and And we can all tell when there's somebody out there scamming, and they might have the social media, but they have no friends. They have no posts except things that they've reposted from someone else. And all of a sudden you start to think, this probably isn't a real person. So you've got to be careful when you're out there. And so do the folks that are renting from you. And I ran into that with my midterm. The first time I launched my midterm, my first midterm, I had a nurse respond, and I thought, I was just kind of doing this for the first time. And so she was back home. She hadn't arrived in Columbus yet, Columbus, Ohio, but she was looking for a place. And so I said, do you want to see it? Do you want to just, and she said, no, I think I'll pass. And so I just took the chance and I said, may I ask why you're deciding to pass? And she said, so many of my nurse friends have been scammed. And she said, I just have to be able to see it. She said, I'm not sending any money anywhere. I'm not filling out any paperwork online. I'm not doing any of that until I know that this place exists and that there's a real life person at the other end. And so I just made myself totally available. I said, you tell me when I can meet you there. I can show it to you. I can, whatever it is you need. And I had to really kind of go out on a limb because, see, again, I was new. And so I didn't have any referrals yet. And she was new in traveling. She had just taken, this was her first assignment. And so here's two newbies and we were kind of scared of each other. I'm like, is she for real? And she was thinking, am I for real? And we had to kind of work through that. So since then, and here's kind of where the secret sauce is. Since then, I've had many traveling nurses through my midterm rentals, and I have all of these reviews. That gives you credibility, because even if they're not all 5-star reviews, mine happen to be, but even if they're not, at least folks looking at those know that you're for real. They know that people actually stayed at your place because not all of those folks are part of your scam. And it would be really hard to be a scammer if you had like 25, references on your channel. So anyway, you have to start though. And so up front, you have to really make yourself available so that your guest feels totally comfortable booking with you. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I can agree 100%. I think building the credibility over time with the great reviews. I always say spoil your first guest, like spoil all your guests, but your first guest, just like go out of, go away above and beyond, give them gifts, check on them, make custom itineraries for them of the local area, do whatever you need to do to secure those 5-star reviews, because immediately once you have enough of those, your occupancy rate is going to shoot up, your wish list is going to shoot up, your cash flow is going to shoot up, and then you can reinvest, get nicer furniture, nicer art. That's what I ended up doing. The first round in Los Angeles was with the free furniture from free Craigslist. But then once I had a lot of money coming in, I upgraded the furniture, and then I had more of a luxury place. And then I was charging double and then later charging triple than what I started. But that was after, 400 amazing reviews, right? That's what kind of happens over time.
I love that. I love that. Yes, you're absolutely correct on all of that. I want to go through right now and make sure that everyone knows how to get in touch with us. And I'll start. I'm Kathy Benner. I'm a passive income coach. Simply go to kathybenner.com and you can find ways to connect with me. You can connect a call. You can send me an email. There's all kinds of ways that you can connect just at kathybenner.com. And Adam put his stuff in the chat already. And Adam, I'll get you to toss mine in the chat, if you will, the kathybenner.com.
Sure.
Toss that in the chat for me. And then Lauren, how can folks get in touch with you?
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to let everybody know that I have quite a few resources. So I have a book for sale on Amazon. It's called Airbnb Beginner's Guide, How to Set Up and Run Your Own Airbnb Business. I wrote this back in 2018, right when I started making a lot of money. And I was like, everyone needs to know about this income style. And I update it every year. So it's been updated with the latest and greatest. I also have a free course on Teachable. It's called Build Your STR Empire in 30 Days. And it's video and it's workbook. It's really designed to help you find your own solutions. So if you need a unique marketing strategy, you need a USP, you need to discover what you want to offer. And all of the things in the course are to guide you to your own answers. And I also have a course on OmniCourse. I have a lot of things. I just came out with a digital nomad course as well because I'm a travel agent. So my website is laurencoates.com, and you can find links to everything there. You can also find me on TikTok and YouTube, Airbnb Wizard.
Okay. I am making a note of that as well. And so you're under Airbnb Wizard. Okay. Very good. Okay, Adam put that all in the chat for us. So everyone that's listening, be sure that you make a note of that. You can take a screen print, write it down. Again, I am going to put the replay of this over at kathybender.com. If you go to kathybender.com, you're just going to scroll down to the real estate investors link. And under that link, you will see how to open a bed and breakfast, Airbnb, VRBO, guest house, or even a midterm rental. And if you click through on the Airbnb link there, you will see that we have this free meetup and all the recordings are there. I also have a course, and then we have a mastermind. So click through if you'd like to be a part of any of that. Again, you'll find all of that at kathybender.com. So any last words of wisdom from Adam? Anything from you?
Yeah, there was a great question that just came up that is
Okay.
near and dear to my heart, and it was based on, and it was from Olya, who's in the audience, and she said, based on your experience, would you say someone who never did Airbnb can buy a turnkey property and leave it to the care of fully to the care of a management company? I did that thing for 3 years. And no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. Don't do it. Don't do it. You have to be involved somehow, a little bit. Like you can, if you get really good and you know how to do it, then you can manage the management company. But I was hands off 100% for like 2.5 years. And long story short, I'm moving into it next month. So yeah, don't do that.
And again, I think you have to have an exit strategy. Things happen, life changes, we're always dealing with all kind of changes. And so no matter what business you get into on the front end, you have to have an exit strategy on the back end. So just make sure your numbers work. And for Adam, they work for him to use it as his own private residence. So that works.
Yeah, it's a sick house, so that's cool.
And it doesn't mean that that's the end of his story. He might later on find an amazing house that he wants to live in, and he might take this one and put it back out there on midterm or even short term in the future. Once you own the real estate, you have all kinds of options. I'm all about options. So you have all kinds of options once you own the real estate. So I love that. So my words of wisdom are: connect with people that are doing this thing. Okay, it doesn't matter, but connect with me, connect with Lauren, connect with Adam, connect with us, and because again, we'll give you all the information that we have, that we know, to help point you in the right direction, because the tide rises all the ships. There's a lot of money out there, there's a lot of business out there, and there's a lot of help out there. So definitely connect with folks that are doing this, because they are there to help you. And again, this is kind of the best group to get help, because we chose to be in the hospitality industry because we like to help people. And so we'll definitely help. Yes.
Can I say real quick, for those that are listening, my email address is adam@lfglending.com. So if you're listening, that's already in the chat, but if you're listening, adam@lfg.com, email me.
Yes. And again, when I put this in our podcast, I list all of our links in the actual podcast description. So folks that are even just listening, they can still scroll down to the description and get all of our links. So I'll put, Adam, I'll put yours in there, and Lauren, I'll put yours in there as well.
Sweet. Awesome.
Okay, cool. Lauren, any last words of wisdom from you?
Yeah, I will say, please make a business plan before you start. I'm sure Kathy talks about this all the time, but really calculating, your return on investment, your initial investment for furnishing with the real numbers of what real rentals are getting, the occupancy rate. It is going to take you a little time to get to that 80% occupancy rate. So just be sure, please make a business plan first and take Kathy's advice, make a, best case, a backup, and then an exit plan all tied together.
Yep. Perfect advice. I love it. Lauren, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you so much. I will be following up with an email to you with the recording of this so that you can use it however you wish. And Adam, feel free when the recordings, if there's any type of recordings that you can use in your business as well, please feel free to do that. Cool. So we will see everyone next month. So thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate everyone that tapped in tonight. And this has been a lot of fun. And Lauren, thank you again for being with us. And tell us where you're at right now. Tell all our listeners where you're actually at.
Sure. I live in a place called Chapada dos Veadeiros, Brazil. It's right in the center of Brazil. It's a big national park.
So she is coming to us all the way from Brazil tonight.
We could do a whole podcast just about that.
I know. Right?
Cool.
Now, do you have any Airbnbs in Brazil?
No, so I do co-host on a few listings back in Richmond, Virginia, which is actually where I grew up. But I focus more on her marketing because she has luxury homes, many of them. So I do her Instagram and her website and all those things. I do help local community set up their Airbnbs with my ambassador link. So okay. I just set up one last week. I have one next week. So I do more of that kind of work around here.
Well, we'll have to connect. So if anybody wants to travel to Brazil, get in touch with Lauren. She can hook you up.
Yes, and I am a travel agent, so let me know.
She can really hook you up. Yes, I love that. Now, when they go to your website, is your travel agent stuff there as well? Is all of that on your website?
No, that's just my Airbnb website. But I would be happy to provide you with a link to my travel agent.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you want to put that in the chat, I'll include it on the podcast.
Oh, okay, great. I don't have the link handy right now. I'm actually on my tablet as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, shoot it over to me and I'll add it.
Okay.
All right. Fantastic. Perfect. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.